بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Continuing with the hadith discussion we've been carrying on for the last few days. Just to recap, the scenario was presented in front of Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu by the sahabi who mentions what occurred in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sahal bin Hanzaliya radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that a mild argument occurred in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with regards to an individual who displays what could be considered to be boasting whilst fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In times of war, to say, I am so and so, to instill fear in the hearts of the enemy, was clarified by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as not being an act of boasting, but rather this will not negate the reward in the hereafter. Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, La ba'sa an yu'jar wa yuhmad. What is the problem, or why should you have any difficulty with accepting that Allah Ta'ala will reward him and also he will get praise in this world? Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was overjoyed when he heard this. فَرَأَيْتُ أَبُ الدَّرْدَاء سُرَّ بِذَلِكَ وَجَعَلَ يَرْفَعُ رَأْسَهُ إِلَيْهِ وَيَقُولُ. And he raised his head, looked at him, at the Sahabi, and he said, أَنْتَ سَمِعْتَ ذَلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. Did you hear Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually say this? That there is no problem, person gets rewarded in the hereafter and he gets praise in this world. In other words, this is not munafi, it does not negate his ikhlas, his sincerity. Sahabi responded, yes. Now, the next section, the reaction of Sayyidina Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu indicates, on the one hand, extreme humility of a student before his teacher. As we mentioned, if it comes to from a point of view of rank or status, Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu far superseded Sahal bin Hanzaliya. Yet, such was the humility that was found in Sahaba. He is learning something from this person who is beneath his rank, but he is learning something from him. So he is extremely indebted to him, full of gratitude, and displays behavior of great humility. فَمَا زَالَ يُعِيدُ عَلَيْهِ حَتَّى إِنِّي لَأَقُولُ لَيَبْرُكَنَّ عَلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ. Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu continued repeating and exulting and showing his happiness with what he had heard from Sahal bin Hanzaliya radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, until he says that Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, until he says, the one who is narrating this incident, until he says that I thought that Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu would end up on his knees. Try and picture this. The group of Sahaba is learning something. Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu is the most senior amongst them. He hears some interaction which occurred with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that greatly pleased him. And did you hear this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Definitely my Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this. Repeats it until he falls onto his knees. So from this we learn the great humility and the great shauq and inclination that Sahaba had to acquire the knowledge of Deen. Nevertheless, to continue the riwayat, فَمَرَّ بِنَا يَوْمًا آخَرٍ. This person, Sahal bin Hanzaliya radiyallahu ta'ala, another day passed by the majlis of Sayyidina Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. فَقَالَ لَهُ Abu Darda. Again Abu Darda appealed to him. كَلِمَةً, please tell us something. تَنْفَعُنَا, we can benefit. وَلَا تَضُرُّكْ, will not cause you any nuqsan or any problem. In other words, we want to impose upon you with great humility, teach us something else that you learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Sahabi mentions another hadith. He says, قال لنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المنفق على الخيل كالباسط يده بصدقة لا يقبضها. He says, I heard from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the one who will spend upon his horse, Allah will reward him like that person who opens his heart. Or literally in the hadith, the word kalbasiti yada, opens his hand. Obviously, when it comes to spending, and you will not literally translate this, opens his hand. What it means, opens his heart. In other words, spends freely. La yaqbiduha. Person who is spending as if there is no end to his spending. So a person who gives sadaqah like that, obviously somebody is going to get a lot of reward. And it is something very, very praiseworthy. So Rasulullah ﷺ equated somebody who spends on his horse like someone who never endingly is giving sadaqah. Now what does this actually mean? Ulama explain, Al-Murad bil-Khayl al-Ma'adda li-Sabilillah. This refers to the horse that you are preparing for jihad or for striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in today's context, what would this hadith mean? If somebody is using his conveyance, obviously in a war situation, where he actually has to face the enemy on the battlefield, then Shariat takes cognizance of the money that he spends preparing his conveyance or his means to fight in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam greatly encouraged such spending. In fact, it's mentioned, مَثَلُ الْمُنْفِقَ عَلَى الْخَيْلِ كَالْمُتَكَفِّفِ بِالصَّدَقَةِ. Another hadith, the example of that person who will spend upon the horse or conveyance that is to be used in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like that person, كَالْمُتَكَفِّفِ. The word kaf means the hands. كَالْمُتَكَفِّفِ بِالصَّدَقَةِ, as if a person who gives alms full charity. Question was put to Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, مَا الْمُتَكَفِّفِ بِالصَّدَقَةِ. What does this expression, al-mutakaffif bis-sadaqa, mean? Umar radiyallahu anhu responded and said, alladhi yu'ti bikaffihi. That person who gives alms full, spends freely in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in another narration it is mentioned, wa arwathuha. That horse that you spend, every aspect of your spending is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if the animal is to be used in jihad in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, وَأَرْوَاثُهَا لِأَهْلِهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مِنْ مِسْكِ الْجَنَّةِ. Even the droppings of that animal on the day of judgment or in Akhirat will be like the musk of Jannah, will be like the fragrance of Jannah. So much of reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you. Obviously, as we mentioned many times before, Sahaba, their fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not with the desire to kill anybody or anything like that. Their actual desire was to spread Allah's deen, for hidayat to come to humanity. Obviously, if certain individuals in certain scenarios became obstacles to that, then this necessitated fighting, etc. The actual objective was not fighting. The actual objective was the spreading of hidayat, the spreading of deen. So in today's context, if someone has some car or some vehicle that he is using in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the propagation of deen, or even if it is a student of deen, somebody who is going to madrasa, somebody who is going to Darul Uloom, or somebody who is striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, any branch or avenue of deen, the conveyance that he uses to spend on that. A lot of times you go in the path of Allah ta'ala, a lot of people sometimes raise this question that, if I use my vehicle, what about the wear and tear? These ahadith are actually directed for that scenario. Yes, the wear and tear and whatever you are spending to keep that vehicle in running condition, if it is being used for the work of deen in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala will reward you not just sadaqah, as if you gave sadaqah hands open. You gave sadaqah with a full heart. So, I remember many years ago, Bhai Padia rahmatullah alayhi, once he was giving some targheeb, with regards to this, and he spoke of what we call different types of mizaj or temperament. And in this temperament, obviously quoting from our elders, he quoted mentioned one is what we call a nabawi mizaj, and one is what we call a daftari mizaj. Daftari mizaj means literally translated, an official temperament. And specifically he gave this as an example, that if you have an opportunity to use your own vehicle in the path of Allah Ta'ala, one is daftari mizaj, will obviously take into cognizance what about wear and tear, and what's going to happen to this and what's going to happen to that. And the nabawi mizaj, kal mutakaffif bis sadaqa. Kal mutakaffif bis sadaqa. Like one who open-heartedly sees this as an opportunity, that how everything of mine can be used in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sahaba would say to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, our lives, our wealth, our horses, our possessions, our family, everything is there at your disposal. And what you will use for the propagation of deen, for the effort of hidayat, is more beloved to us than what you will leave behind. Now this type of jazba and zeal that Sahaba Kiram had to give everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is derived from such a hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, the mafhum of the hadith, that even the droppings of the horse that is used for the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kal miskil jannah, is like the musk or the perfume or the fragrance of Jannah. Nothing will be wasted. In the lines of deen, in lines of dunya, we want a maximum return for everything. Today, like I said, daftari mizaj, the wear and tear is taking cognizance, travel allowance is given, etc. In the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all that is coming from your own pocket. But we should not hesitate. In fact, it's a great opportunity Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us. Al-munfiq al-khayl kal-basiti yadahu bis-sadaqa la yaqbiduha. Really, there's no easy way to translate this or to do full justice to the type of encouragement that is found in such a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I translated it once, I'm translating it again. But like I said, the nuances that are found in this expression, literal translation doesn't do justice to the extreme encouragement Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving us to spend in the way of Allah. Don't count the pennies and don't be technical. Particularly, like I said, in this day and age, when Allah gives us a chance to spend, to feed in the Jamaat, to use our vehicle for the Jamaat, to go and fetch one Jamaat. Sometimes if Allah has given us the means to have a vehicle specifically devoted to this, then how it can be used for Allah's deen, how it can be used in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-munfiq al-khayl, the one who will spend on his conveyance. Which conveyance? Al-ma'adda li sabilillah, the conveyance that is being used for the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kal-basit yadi, like that person who opened his hand, didn't have any reservation, opened his hand, in other words, he opened his heart with sadaqah. And how? In sadaqah, in charity, Allah is rewarding him with sadaqah. Sadaqah is not only just putting some money in some poor person's hand. That is one type of sadaqah. This is another very great type of sadaqah. In fact, this is almost like the height of sadaqah. Kalbasit yadi. The man who will use his conveyance and will prepare it and will spend particularly on it and will be unreserved in his heart that how my means, my conveyance, everything of mine can be used for the effort of deen. Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam exulted in the praise of such person. He said, not only is this sadaqah, this is the sadaqah of that man, la yaqbiduha, who is giving unreservedly. Allah Ta'ala, in other words, you are spending unreservedly in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will reward you unreservedly. Why? Because this is kal mutakaffif bis sadaqah. This is hands full. This is a person who has put himself forward to spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I am reiterating, even the droppings, today call it the wear and tear, or call it the exhaust fumes, or call it the mechanical problems that you will incur in that vehicle which you have put forward voluntarily to be used for the effort of deen, kal miskil jannah. Tomorrow inshallah in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this will be like the perfume or the fragrance of Jannah. Like your Tawfiq subhanahu.